Good morning, everybody. This is Darren Redmond for Redmond's Morning Glory. You usually see me around 10 o'clock at night Pacific Standard Time, a little 1 a.m. action on the East Coast. I'm going to shake things up a little bit. We're going to do some late night action. We're going to do some early morning action, a little morning glory, if you will. Just for a couple of minutes, kind of talk about what might be interesting during the day I want to talk about. And, join us for the ride in the morning. Grab that cup of coffee, and on the East Coast, you're probably at work already, doing some things, probably taking a coffee break. That's what this is about, a little coffee break with your pal Darren Redmond from FHT Sports. So, a couple things I want to talk about. We're going to start with basketball. James Harden threw another 60. This is what, his fifth game or so with over 50 points this season? One thing we know about Harden, and no shade, it's not easy getting 61 points, is it? A little easier when you're playing the Knicks, but if you see what happened with the Knicks last night, you understand everything about sort of the, Uncle Tony, my partner, co-owner with Hockey Guru, Morning Glory, woohoo, that's right, thank you very much. There are these people, and I'll start with Serge to kind of put in perspective what Uncle Tony talks about. There are these statistic gatherers, these guys that, and females too in their sports, that they play all sports, where they just accumulate stats. But do they really help the team win? Now, Houston Rockets are a team on the come. We know that this is a team, even though they jettisoned out, Carmelo Anthony, this is a team that is dangerous. I mean, they gave the Golden State Warriors a big run. We know this. But Harden comes up small in the playoffs. When people are banging bodies, truthfully banging bodies, instead of typical January, you want to get bored? Watch a lot of these sports in January. It's a great to get tickets to bring your youngins to the game because there's usually a lot of seats available come January right before playoff time. Don't want to pull a hamstring, you're trying out some things. Sure, you want to win games, but has anybody really put the wood onto Harden? Has he been in a situation where he has to make a key pass? No. He just has a green light to shoot whenever he wants. 61 points against the Knicks and you barely win? The Knicks are awful. They have, 10 wins, 38 losses? It's a shame. You heard me talk about this at night. So bring a pillow at night and get a cup of coffee in the morning, because when we're talking at night, we're talking in the morning. So when he gets over 50 points 5 different times already, 60 points, the Knicks barely wins. Knicks can't guard anybody. I mean, they just can't. But you know what? You're still going to get the same old Knicks when Madison Square Garden, the Mecca of boxing, is sold out every night, where you can spend up to $2,000 for a court ticket. There is no incentive for them to actually put a team out there that makes any sense. So Harden, again, you have to kind of tip the hat to Harden. 60 points is not easy. 50 points is not easy, but to do it, close to a half a dozen times already, and we're still only in January. Does that make him maybe the MVP of the league? Yeah, because the MVP is flawed in regular season. So, I believe that an MVP should take into account the regular season, but not exclude the postseason, because that's a real MVP. So, Uncle Tony talks about it all the time, about these players that are just statistical gatherers. They gather numbers, but what does it really mean? And we have them in hockey. You know who they are. And you have them in football, of course. They're getting useless yardage. It's nothing I find funnier than when someone says, well, look at all the yards he threw. Yeah, he threw all those yardage because his team was down by 15, 18 points in the fourth quarter, had to throw the ball every play. Or they'll say, yeah, he wins a lot of games, but he throws a lot of touchdowns. He throws a lot of interceptions. Yes, again, get out of the numbers. Get out of the numbers. Why? Because his team does not have a good defense, and the quarterback is always playing from behind but finding a way to win. Let's look at Tom Brady in this last AFC championship game. If you look at his statistics, they weren't very good. If you look at the way he handled the fourth quarter and overtime, he was spectacular. This is where Statistics need to be put in perspective. We need to put statistics in perspective. So when that person wants to, impress his friends by looking like a nerd, I guess. Now, you should know your statistics, of course, and say, well, he threw 2 interceptions, and if you take that 2 interceptions and there's 16 games, it's 32 interceptions over the course of a year. You want that? Stupid question. Don't ever respond to that. Just roll your eyes and say, when were the interceptions thrown? What was going on in the game? So that's any sport. That's any sport, So you picked a sport and that kind of thing happens. So another thing I want to talk about, and we're going to talk about a lot at night. I'm probably going to be with Uncle Tony tonight, who is the king of telling it like it is. Howard Cosell used to say, that's the way it is. Tony Durant, in a lot of ways, is to Howard Cosell. He knows a lot about different sports. He's not there to be a friend. He's not there just to be controversial. You can read through that, right? You see these guys and they try to do some things, and it's just they're just trying to stir the pot to stir the pot. Tony, it's very organic. It's very real. So here in Morning Wood, there you go, Freudian slip, Morning Glory. What we're doing with Morning Glory is, and did he really do that slip on purpose, or was it an accident? I don't know. Who's listening? So with Morning Glory, what we want to do is we want to talk about the things that might be talked about today, and then we're going to wrap them up at night. So let's talk a little bit about Fresno State basketball. I'm a big basketball guy, as you know. At FHT, we cover a lot of the sports. We went to a lot of the early games. Haven't been to the last couple of games. We'll be there again. But shameful, absolutely shameful, that there were only 5,000 people at Seymour Center the last game against San Diego State. This was a feisty game. Not surprised that Fresno State came back and won. This has everything to do, by the way. The one thing that's really not reported, in my opinion, was they didn't want to see yet again what happened against the game against that Utah team a couple weeks ago, where I told you. I was really the only one that told you that Fresno State would lose that game. I watched this team. I watched the coach. Coach is fantastic. He should be Mountain West Coach of the Year. This team with Bittner and everybody else on the team doing just wonderfully. But they laid that egg. And you know what? It felt crappy. Because they're trying to get a home fan base. And we had 10,000 against Nevada here, which was really nice. But by the second half, they were quiet. It felt like I was in a library. Much more loud against San Diego State, because it was a very feisty game. Felt like a Big East game. I'm a Big East guy, not just because I'm East Coast. People could talk about the ACC, they could talk about the SEC, they could talk about all this other stuff. But the best college basketball ever was the Big East in the mid-'80s through the mid-'90s. And I love what's going on with the Big East today. There's a lot of good things going on there. I've said the two really shocking teams this year are Fresno State and St. John's. But back to the other night, this team was woefully behind. But here's what happens. You let a team, you don't put your foot on the neck of your opponent, and you let them back in. And there was a great run at the end of the first half. Christopher Gabriel of ESPN, 940 ESPN, the best afternoon drive time sports talk show in the nation, not just in California. If you don't watch CGP, you don't listen to CGP, shame on you. It's free on the internet. Give them a listen. So for those of you on the East Coast, you want to hear a guy from Chicago through Philly with East Coast sensibility but with the understanding of all sports, and can do it in a fun way, listen to CGP, 940 ESPN. He does a great job. He talked about it. There was a run at the end of the first half. See, a lot of times people want to talk about the big shot at the end of the game. Well, what facilitated that earlier, right? What facilitated that earlier? The big run. The big run at the end of the first half, where they're able to cut into that lead. I talk about, all the time, and Serge, the hockey guru, talks about how I was 9-1 in the playoffs with football. Yes, and it was a nice run, got some breaks. But there were people all over the country, and thank you for this, and I say that with no hubris, all over the country texting me, look how fast, the New Orleans Saints, they got scored again. You're leaving points on the board. Understanding you want to come away with points even if they're 3. But nothing? Who cares? There's a whole game to play. There's a whole game to play. You let the Rams hang around. And enough with the complaining about the pass interference call. How about the face mask call? How about the fact that you let the Saints defense let the Rams go right down the field? How about that? Yeah, bad call. Don't get me wrong. Bad call. Should have never happened, but it happened. What do? Why didn't you put the game away in the first half? San Diego, instead of jarring at Fresno State, instead of thinking the game was in hand, how about you play the game? How about you learn the game? Now, granted, you have some skills that a lot of people don't have. That's why you're Division I. But Fresno fans, 5,000 again in a conference rival, San Diego State. You know it's going to be jarring. You know, I follow travel hockey and youth travel hockey, and when you play San Diego, it's a big thing down there. 6,000. Shame on you, fans. I'm calling you out. That place should be packed. Well, it is midweek. What are you doing till 10 o'clock at night? Game's over by 10. How many of you, by a show of hands, are actually asleep? Well, I got to get the kids up, but really? You mean you're not watching, I don't know, Dancing with the Stars? You're not watching, I don't know, whatever's on TV these days? Stop lying. You chose not to go to the game because it wasn't important enough to you. And I'm not saying that needs to be important to you. And you're certainly never going to hear from me, well, it's your team value, this or that. But here's the thing. You're missing out on something great. I expect to see 1,000 people or more at every single Fresno State baseball game because we're going to be there covering it. We'll be covering the softball as well. You have some great sports here with some unbelievable coaching. There's going to be a really nice story written here, top 25 finish in football and basketball this year. You could bank it. Where are you? Where are you? Show of hands, where are you? Why are you hiding? And the worst thing is the person who pretends that they were at the game and we know you weren't. And to my brethren, to my official media folk, it's nice to see you finally coming out when you think the games are important. Nice. Nice to see you there. And I hope you get your full of free soda and free coffee and almost talking about the game. That's nice. And we're not coming for you, but you know what? You're ignoring some of the people out there, and they're not going to be ignored anymore. They're not. You know, on a personal level, as I wrap this up, and I was going to talk baseball, but it's getting late. On a personal level, I want to congratulate Adrian Bogosian. Yes, he is the son of the hockey guru. And make sure you watch the hockey guru. The guy's funny. And again, I mentioned it the other day, right? Didn't I? What this guy can do is be a fan and be objective and humorous all at the same time. It's not an easy skill to have. I certainly can't do it. I have to try to not be a fan. I have to work very hard to be objective. Trust me, as a New York Jet fan and an Oakland Raider fan, you know, I'm not a big fan of Tom Brady and the Patriots, but when I think they're going to win, I'm going to tell you why. I will always look at things from a former player and a former collegiate coach. So I can guarantee you that. So Adrian Bogosian has been selected to take part in a prospect camp and a tournament, rather. And that there's only 9 goalies in the whole state of California. And in case you didn't realize, no disrespect to Delaware, but California has a little more people than Delaware. And read my reviews, I hope you do. We don't have to agree on everything. It doesn't make you a wrong or bad person. You know, my belief is, and I know quite a few players and coaches who played at very high levels and coach at very high levels, and I coach Division I sports. I'm sorry. But if your kid is on a travel team or an in-house team, and it's a regular season game and has a chance to be seen, maybe help find his way to a college somewhere. I'm not talking about scholarships, but maybe a scholarship. Maybe play for a Western Coast team or whatever. You're foolish if you're going to let some dad or PTA parent, try to manipulate you so their kid can get another win under their belt and get an ice cream later. No, you have to focus your kid. That's your job. Now, different if it's a tournament, different if it's playoffs, because then there's an additional investment. So, we wish Adrian Bogosian the best. I know the hockey guru will be there, reporting for us. Real quick about the Hall of Fame. I think this was the best selection in a very long time. I see no reason why any of these people should not have been in. And there's no slam dunks. Messina was not a slam dunk. He's not. He was a bulldog. You know, he had 120 win season at his final year because Joe Girardi did such a great job with him. Do I think Messina should be in? Absolutely. He was the bulldog with the Orioles, bulldog with the Yankees. You know, Edgar Martinez. I see people all want to talk about the stats, and it came with new stats, right? I think there's a stat about if you wear your hat tilted to the side on a Wednesday, and they all sound like the smartest thing since sliced bread. Zig Ziglar used to call it gorilla dust. It's just a gorilla dust. It's just a way of getting attention. But some of that stuff is real. You got to kind of look at these stats. There's no right or wrong, right? There's just evolving. And here's what it's like. You know, it's like when you look at statistics and you look at stats, it's like farming. What plants should you plant this year? What's your steady crop? How should you change things up? Sometimes we make good decisions, sometimes we make bad decisions. Harold Baines with 2,800 hits. Well, if we would have had the strike, or if the sun was coming down a certain way, should be in the Hall of Fame? No. The Hall of Fame. Did I lose sleep over it like I told you in my vlog? No, I didn't lose any sleep over it. Didn't lose any sleep over it. But at the same time, would I put him in? Absolutely not. To think that you know, somebody who has multiple World Series champions is being judged by who he chooses to associate with, and somehow try to justify that by making these you know, word vomit type of statements about these people, they should be judged on the field, nothing more. If you're judging by anything else, well then O.J. Simpson should be out of the Hall of Fame. Right? So if you're not holding, so for those of you who talk about certain people who should be in baseball's Hall of Fame, out of baseball's Hall of Fame, if you have no problem with O.J. Simpson being in the Hall of Fame in football, you shouldn't hold people out because who they choose to maybe talk to on the radio show. I couldn't believe I heard this. You know, or people write about, or people out. Now, you know, make the decision. I want to know why crime dog Fred McGriff is not in the Hall of Fame. You know, the guy has close to 500 home runs. I think the Veterans Committee will get him in. But can somebody tell me why this guy is not in the Hall of Fame? Now, you can come to some rogue stats and point to where the pimple is on the back of the person. We get it. But let me ask you this. When Fred McGriff was up, did you stop to watch? Yeah, you did. Close to 500 home runs. He tried with the Rays to try to hang on enough to get those 500 home runs. It never happened. But pretty darn, right? Pretty darn good. And I want, you know, and my thought is when what's not called the Veterans Committee, but when the Veterans Committee looks at this thing, they'll put him in. They'll put him in. Absolutely, he'll be put in. You know, I think the cases of people like Andy Pettit, a little different. Everybody wants it to be because it's like lazy, right? But you know, you want to talk about Clemens. I think they'll both be in. Here's my prediction. Write it down from Redmond's Morning Glory. Is that on their 10th and final year, both Clemens and Bonds will get in before they get moved to the Veterans Committee. So the writers, as they feed their face at every press, you know, every press in the press box, and this is the way it is, right? You have to kowtow and bow to, you know, to the baseball elite press. And yet, do we want to be part of that? Absolutely. But we want to bring a perspective from the players. That's why I love the Players Journal. What Jeter and some of the others are doing. It's not anti-journalist, but it's like, you know, like, have a clue. Have a clue. Stop bringing your windbreaker and have a clue. Should they be judged on what they did on the field? Absolutely. Nobody has answered me this question. If you are keeping out Roger Clemens, and I hate Roger Clemens. I'm a Met fan. What he did beating Mike Piazza, I hate the guy. But if you think it was just ether, how he got 7 Cy Youngs, and Barry Bonds is Barry Bonds. And again, if you don't think some of these other guys may or may not have, I get it. But what do they do on the field? If they were allowed to cross the lines, then that's it. Because if you're going to keep them out, how the hell do you put in Tony La Russa and Joe Torre? How the hell do you put in Tony La Russa and Joe Torre, who benefited from the Mark McGuire, Sosa? How do you do it? How do you put them in? How do you put them in? Roger Clemens. So you can't have a standard that is set differently. If you got wins, what was it? Reggie Bush, right? When Reggie Bush got his Heisman taken away, USC had to vacate those wins. That doesn't happen in baseball. So what you did is you threw a tic-tac parade for the managers. It's shameful, it's pity, it's small. Be big, be large. You know, understand the full context.